My name is Chloe Miller. I am 31 years old, and the last time my mother visited my house, she left a ticking time bomb on my coffee table. My son was 5. He sat on the living room rug holding a silver-wrapped box we had explicitly forbidden. His eyes were wide, his small hands gripped it tight. "Grandma said she brought the real present," he whispered. "She said you just can't afford nice things." I knelt down, took the box and told him to go wash up for dinner. Then I looked at the glossy gift receipt. What I discovered next made me walk straight into the financial crimes unit, but the detectives were only the beginning. What happened over the next 48 hours would shatter the perfect illusion my golden child brother held and force my father to face the monster he had been protecting for years. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where family moments get the spotlight they deserve. The messy ones, the hard ones, the ones that change everything. Drop a comment below if you have ever been called bitter when you were just trying to survive. Be sure to subscribe. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, a quiet, middle-class suburb where everyone paid too much attention to what kind of car sat in your driveway and who had the best lawn. In our house, there was a strict divide. My older brother David was the smart investment. I was the financial liability. That is what my mother Donna called me from the time I was 12 years old. "Chloe is a reckless spender. Chloe doesn't respect the value of a dollar." She said it casually, pouring iced tea for her friends on the patio. She said it like it was a medical diagnosis. David got a crisp $50 bill for getting a B on his middle school report card. He put it in a savings account. My parents actually framed his first bank statement and put it in his bedroom. I spent my summers knocking on doors, offering to weed gardens and mow lawns. When I bought my own school clothes with crinkled $20 bills I earned myself, my mother told me to go wash my hands. She said I was playing with dirty money. According to her, girls didn't need to hustle in the dirt. They needed to find a man with a solid 401 and keep the house clean. I didn't listen. At 24, I started a commercial catering business, corporate lunches, small weddings, local events. I worked 70 hours a week. I drove a silver 2008 Honda Civic with a dented back bumper. I lived on instant noodles and tap water for 2 years just to make sure my business loan was paid early every single month. I needed my credit to be pristine. My mother told our neighbors I was throwing my life away serving food to strangers. David, on the other hand, was the golden boy. He invested in a buddy's tech startup. He wore tailored suits to family dinners. He married Alyssa, a woman who somehow managed to bring up her country club membership within 3 minutes of meeting you. When David bought his first luxury SUV, my parents beamed with pride. But here is what nobody at the country club knew. When David's tech startup went under in 2018, my parents bailed him out. They wired him $38,500 to cover his debts. They called it a prudent family investment. 2 years later, the housing market dipped. My parents fell 3 months behind on their own mortgage. The bank sent a foreclosure warning. I found my father, Robert, sitting in his Buick in the driveway, crying with the engine off. I drove straight to my credit union. I got a cashier's check for $9,200. I handed it to my father in the kitchen. My mother walked in, saw the check, and snatched it out of his hands. "Do not tell your brother about this," she said. "It would ruin the family morale." Not a thank you, just a command to protect David's ego. I didn't hate David for any of it. He figured out the rules of my mother's house early. If you looked successful, you were safe. He played the part, and he got the rewards. At our annual 4th of July BBQ that same year, my mother stood by the grill. She handed me a paper plate and sighed loud enough for my extended family to hear. "It's such a shame Chloe is still renting that cramped duplex. She just doesn't understand how to save." David smirked over his beer. My father suddenly stared very hard at his potato salad. I put the paper plate down on the picnic table and walked to my car in silence. I met Marcus on a Tuesday at a restaurant depot in Milwaukee. I was trying to load a 50-pound bag of bulk flour into the trunk of my Civic. He was buying supplies for the high school culinary arts program he taught. He just grabbed the other side of the heavy paper bag, hoisted it up, and said, "Lift with your knees, or you'll need a chiropractor by 30. We got married 3 years later at the county courthouse. A Tuesday morning, I wore a simple white dress from a department store. Marcus wore his only suit. My mother had demanded we take out a $20,000 personal loan to throw a massive reception at the Oak Hills Country Club. When I told her no, that we were saving for a house, she didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. Marcus just held my hand. "We don't need a party to be married," he said. He came from a family that paid their bills quietly and actually liked each other. He didn't understand a family where money was used as a weapon. When our son Leo was born, My mother's tactics changed. She didn't criticize my duplex anymore. She started dropping by with heavy, glossy envelopes. She showed up one afternoon when Leo was 3 months old. Marcus was at work. I was rocking Leo to sleep. She dropped a thick blue Charles Schwab folder on my coffee table. "I opened a college fund for him," she announced. She didn't ask. She just did it. Someone has to be the adult in the room and build his future. I felt my chest tighten. I looked at the folder. "Mom, Marcus and I are already saving for his future. We have our own accounts for him." She looked around my small living room, her eyes lingering on the scuffed edges of our hand-me-down rug. "Oh, sweetie, let Grandma handle the real money. You just focus on your little cooking hobby." I told her we didn't want her money hanging over our heads, that Leo was our financial responsibility. My mother waved her hand. "It's just a safety net," she said, brushing an invisible speck of dust off her designer slacks. "Don't be so dramatic, Chloe. You never could look at the big picture." The years passed, and those blue folders turned into a quiet, suffocating war. By the time Leo turned 5, my mother wasn't just trying to be a grandmother. She was trying to outbid us for our own child. It happened on a rainy Sunday evening, 5:45 p.m. We had just finished singing Happy Birthday to Leo in our tiny dining room. Marcus and I had saved up to buy him a beautiful, handcrafted wooden train set he had been begging for. Leo was thrilled. He was on the floor, connecting the magnetic tracks. Then the front door chimed. My mother walked in holding a massive box wrapped in metallic silver paper. "Grandma brought the real present," she announced. Leo tore the paper open. It was a $399 Nintendo Switch bundle, 2 extra controllers, 4 games. I felt my stomach drop. 3 weeks earlier, I had explicitly told my mother on the phone that we were a screen-free house for Leo during the week, and we absolutely did not want a gaming console yet. I had been perfectly clear. "Mom," I said quietly, stepping between Leo and the box. "We talked about this. We said no consoles." My mother didn't look at me. She knelt down next to Leo, who was staring wide-eyed at the shiny packaging. She stroked his hair and sighed dramatically. "I'm sorry, Leo," she whispered, but her voice was loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Your mom just can't afford the nice things Grandma can. She gets a little jealous. But Grandma will always make sure you aren't left behind." I froze. She was planting the seed right in his 5-year-old brain. She was painting us as poor, unstable, and restrictive, while she was the wealthy savior. Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. He picked up the silver box and handed it back to my mother. "We appreciate the thought, Donna," Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "But Chloe already gave you our answer. We'll walk you to your car." She left, but the damage was done. Leo cried for an hour. It was a cage built entirely out of price tags. Everything shifted 2 months later. Great-Aunt Dorothy moved back to Wisconsin after living in Scottsdale, Arizona for 15 years. Dorothy was my mother's older sister, but they couldn't have been more different. Dorothy was sharp. She wore heavy turquoise rings, drove a dusty Subaru Outback, and had made her own fortune flipping commercial real estate in the desert. She visited my catering kitchen on a Wednesday morning at 9:15 a.m. I was covered in flour, prepping 200 chicken skewers for a corporate retreat. I expected her to look at my stainless steel prep tables with the same disdain my mother did. Instead, Dorothy grabbed a hairnet, washed her hands, and started helping me thread the chicken onto the bamboo sticks. "Your mother told me you were playing around with a little food hobby," Dorothy said, her eyes scanning my organized walk-in cooler and the stacked delivery crates. "Donna is an idiot. You built a real engine here, kid. You're doing the hard work." I nearly dropped my knife. It was the first time someone from my side of the family had ever looked at my sweat and called it success. My mother hated Dorothy's return. She hated that Dorothy took an active interest in my business. She hated that Dorothy didn't care about country club memberships or pristine lawns. But mostly, I think my mother hated that Dorothy saw right through her. That same year, Marcus and I finally reached our goal. We had scraped, saved, and budgeted every dollar. We had $65,000 sitting in our savings account for a down payment on a house. We were tired of the cramped duplex. We wanted a backyard for Leo. We found it in Elmbrook, a modest, single-story, 3-bedroom ranch. It had a big oak tree in the front and a kitchen with enough counter space for me to test recipes at home. We put in an offer. It was accepted. We spent the weekend packing boxes, imagining where our furniture would go. We were finally stepping out from under the shadow of my mother's constant judgment. On Thursday morning, I was at my desk reviewing vendor invoices. The sun was shining through the blinds. I felt lighter than I had in years. At exactly 10:30 a.m., my cell phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, our mortgage loan officer at the bank. I answered on the first ring, a smile already on my face, expecting to hear about the closing date. "Chloe," he said. His voice didn't sound right. It was tight. Awkward. "I'm looking at the underwriting report. There's a major problem." "What kind of problem?" I asked. My fingers gripped the edge of my desk. "Your application is denied, Chloe. Your credit score just pulled at 512. The air left my lungs." "That is impossible. I paid off my business loan 2 years ago. I don't carry any debt. I pay my credit card in full every month." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. The sound was dry and uncomfortable. "The report shows multiple severe delinquencies, accounts in active collections. I'm sorry, but we cannot move forward with the mortgage." I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the device on the floor. I didn't cry, I just felt completely cold. The Elmbrook house with the big oak tree was gone, just like that. I called my best friend Rebecca. She is a CPA. I told her I needed her right now. She arrived at my duplex at 11:45 a.m. She opened her silver Dell laptop on my kitchen table. "Let's pull a comprehensive forensic credit report," she said. Her fingers typed fast across the keyboard. We waited in silence while the screen loaded. She turned the laptop toward me. I stared at the screen. I felt physically sick to my stomach. There were 4 active credit cards in my name. A Chase Sapphire card maxed out at $14,200. A Discover card holding an $8,500 balance, a Capital One account, and a $22,000 personal loan from Wells Fargo. All taken out over the last 7 years. "Chloe," Rebecca pointed to a line of text at the very top of the report. "Look at the billing address. It wasn't the address for my duplex. It was P.O. Box 402 in Oak Creek. I knew that box. My mother rented it 10 years ago when she was selling Avon products to her country club friends. She always told us she kept it open for secure mail." I grabbed my car keys off the counter. I drove the 12 miles to my parents' house in total silence. I pulled into their pristine, freshly paved driveway. My mother was standing on the front porch, arranging potted geraniums. She wore a crisp white blouse and khaki trousers. She looked like the picture of suburban perfection. I walked up the brick steps and slammed the printed credit report onto the glass patio table. "Explain this," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. Donna looked down at the papers. She didn't flinch. She didn't drop her gardening trowel. She just calmly pushed her sunglasses up onto her head. "It is obviously a banking error," she said smoothly. "You know how these corporate computers are. Someone probably mixed up our files. They are linked to your P.O. box, Mom. You opened credit cards in my name. You stole my identity." My mother stood up. Her face changed in a fraction of a second. The calm mask vanished, replaced by instant, practiced victimhood. She put a hand over her chest. "How dare you come to my house and accuse me of stealing?" Her voice rose, shrill and shaking, designed to carry to the neighbors' yards. "After everything I have done for you? You ruin your own finances with that little catering hobby, and now you want to blame your own mother because you are bitter and failing." The heavy oak front door opened. My father stepped out onto the porch. He looked at the printed papers scattered on the glass table. He looked at my face. He knew. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped. He absolutely knew. But instead of looking at my mother, he looked at me. "Chloe, please leave," Robert said. His voice was a tired mumble. "You are stressing your mother out. You know her blood pressure cannot take this kind of drama." I stared at my father. He was choosing her comfort over my survival. He was willing to let me drown in fraudulent debt just to keep the peace in his living room. I backed down the steps. I didn't say another word. I got into my rusted Civic and drove away. I gripped the cracked leather steering wheel of my Civic so hard my knuckles turned white. I watched my parents' pristine brick house disappear in the rearview mirror. I drove back to my duplex, my mind spinning through 7 years of family dinners, holiday parties, and quiet insults, realizing every single one of those moments was funded by my stolen future. For 3 days the phone didn't ring, no text from my brother, no apology from my father. Complete radio silence. Then, on Tuesday at 1:15 p.m., the doorbell rang. I was in my catering prep kitchen, wrapping aluminum foil over massive trays of roasted vegetables for a local dental clinic staff lunch. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the front door. A woman in a gray pantsuit stood on the porch. She wore a laminated ID badge on a lanyard and held a thick manila folder. "Miss Chloe Miller?" she asked. Her voice was flat, professional. "I am Agent Harper with Child Protective Services." I stopped breathing. The porch suddenly felt very small. "We received an anonymous tip," she continued, her eyes scanning the hallway behind me. The caller stated that there is no running water in this residence, the environment is unsanitary, and you cannot afford to feed your 5-year-old son. I stared at her. The sheer cruelty of the lie anchored my feet to the floor. "Come in," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I walked her straight past the living room and into the prep kitchen. I turned on the industrial stainless steel sink. The water ran clear and strong. I opened the door to my commercial walk-in refrigerator. Inside were crates of fresh spinach, flats of organic strawberries, and $400 worth of premium chicken breast prepped for the week's orders. Agent Harper looked at the massive volume of food. She looked at the spotless countertops. She looked at the City Health Department A rating framed on the wall. She closed her folder. "Miss Miller, I apologize for the intrusion," she said, her tone softening completely. "Unfortunately, our system gets weaponized sometimes. It looks like someone is trying to cause you a lot of trouble." I walked her out. I locked the deadbolt. I slid down the front door until I was sitting on the floor mat. My mother hadn't just stolen my credit. She had sent a government agent to my home to threaten the one thing I loved more than anything else. It was a clear, unmistakable message. Drop the financial accusations, or I will take your child. I didn't back down. I pulled my phone from my apron pocket and called Rebecca. "I need to go to the police," I said. Now. Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., Rebecca and I sat in a cramped office at the Financial Crimes Unit in downtown Milwaukee. Detective Miller was a tired-looking man with a graying mustache and a desk covered in coffee cups. Rebecca didn't waste time. She handed him a binder. It contained the forensic credit report, the P.O. box history, and 5 years of my catering business tax returns proving I had never touched the fraudulent accounts. "This is identity theft and wire fraud," Rebecca told him. "We need subpoenas for the IP addresses used to open these online applications." Detective Miller looked through the binder. He nodded. "I'll get the warrants." 2 agonizing weeks passed. I cooked. I delivered food. I kissed Leo goodnight and checked the locks on the doors twice before trying to sleep. On a Friday afternoon, Detective Miller called me back into the station. He had the detailed bank statements and the digital footprints from the credit card companies. He slid a piece of paper across the metal desk. The applications for the Chase, Discover, and Capital One cards were all submitted from the same IP address. It traces directly to a Comcast router registered to Robert and Donna Hayes in Oak Creek, my parents' home Wi-Fi network. "Now look at the statements," Detective Miller said gently. I picked up the thick stack of papers. The ink on the pages documented exactly where my stolen future went. It wasn't used for survival. It wasn't groceries or heating bills. Line item, October 12th, $3,400 to the Milwaukee Botanical Gardens. Alyssa's lavish baby shower. Line item, January 5th, $1,200 to Oak Hills Country Club, my mother's quarterly golf dues. Line item, June 18th, $850 to Nordstrom. Then I saw a transaction that made the room spin. October 14th, 2020. A massive payment issued to Wells Fargo from the fraudulent Chase card. The exact amount was $9,200. I dropped the paper. That was the exact week my parents were facing foreclosure. That was the week I handed my father a $9,200 cashier's check that I had drained from my catering emergency fund. My mother hadn't used my hard-earned cash to pay the bank. She had pocketed my money, hidden it, and paid their mortgage using a credit card she opened in my name. I had essentially paid them to steal my identity. I walked out of the police station in a daze. I sat in my Civic. I dialed Great Aunt Dorothy's number. When she answered, I couldn't form words. I just sobbed into the receiver. "Stay right there," Dorothy said. "I am coming." She met me at my duplex an hour later. She sat at my kitchen table, adjusting her reading glasses. She read the IP trace report. She read the bank statements. She looked at the $9,200 line item. Her face, usually lined with a warm smile, turned to absolute stone. She took off her glasses and set them on the table. "She hasn't changed," Dorothy whispered, staring at the wall. "What do you mean?" I asked. Dorothy looked at me. 40 years ago, Donna did the exact same thing to our mother, your grandmother. She was 22, Dorothy said, keeping her eyes fixed on the kitchen wall. It was 1986. Donna wanted a lifestyle she couldn't afford on a receptionist's salary. She started forging our mother's signature on personal checks. She drained her savings to buy designer clothes and finance trips to Chicago. I sat perfectly still. My catering business ledgers were pushed to the side of the table. The police reports sat between us. "The bank caught it," Dorothy continued. "They were going to press criminal charges. I had just sold my first commercial property, so I wrote a check for $15,000 to cover the stolen funds. I kept your mother out of jail, And you know what she did the very next day? I shook my head. She told me I was dead to her. She cut me out completely because I knew what she really was. She couldn't stand looking at the person who paid her debt. Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Donna uses money to control the narrative. When she can't control it, she destroys the evidence. I needed to talk to David. Not at my house. Not at his. I sent him a text message at 8 a.m. on Thursday. Meet me at Collectivo Coffee on Lincoln Avenue at 10 a.m. Do not tell Mom. He walked into the coffee shop at 10:04 a.m. He wore a crisp Patagonia fleece vest and expensive leather loafers. He ordered a $6 oat milk latte, paid with his phone, and sat down across from me at a small wooden table near the back. He looked at me the way he always did, like I was a charity case taking up his valuable time. If this is about a loan, Chloe, Alyssa and I just put down a deposit on a boat, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. I can't bail you out right now. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my catering business. I just opened my leather tote bag and pulled out a manila folder. I slid it across the table. Look at the second page, I said. David sighed, annoyed, and opened the folder. He read Detective Miller's IP trace report. He saw our parents' Comcast router address. He frowned, not understanding. Then I slid the detailed Chase bank statement over the police report. I had highlighted one specific line with a yellow marker. November 3rd, 2018. Cash advance, $38,500. David stared at the yellow line. He stopped breathing. November 2018 was the exact month his tech startup collapsed. It was the exact month our parents had wired him a prudent family investment to save him from bankruptcy. Chloe, his voice barely made a sound. Mom didn't use her savings to bail you out, David, I said quietly. She used my social security number. She opened a credit card in my name, pulled a cash advance, and handed it to you. Your rescue was funded by my identity theft. I watched the golden boy shatter. He didn't yell. He didn't throw his coffee. He just sat there as the foundation of his entire adult life cracked wide open. He realized his perfect credit, his luxury SUV, and his boat deposit were all built on my financial sabotage. He had spent years smirking at my rusted Honda Civic, never knowing he was the reason I had to drive it. He put his hands over his face. He rubbed his eyes hard. When he looked back up, the arrogance was completely gone. He looked terrified. It's worse than this, David whispered. He leaned forward, looking around the coffee shop as if our mother was hiding behind the pastry case. What do you mean? She is at a lawyer's office right now, Chloe. Yesterday she called me asking for a character reference. She is filing an emergency petition for guardianship of Leo. My blood ran completely cold. David kept talking, his words spilling out fast. She told me you were drowning in massive, unmanageable debt. She said she had proof you couldn't afford running water, and that Child Protective Services was already investigating you. She is using the CPS report to prove you are an unfit mother. The pieces snapped together in my mind with a sickening click. It wasn't just about stealing money anymore. It was a perfectly engineered trap. She ruined my credit, used the fraudulent debt to frame me as financially unstable, called CPS to create a government record of neglect, and was now using that exact record to legally steal my son. She was terrified of becoming irrelevant. By financially crippling me and taking Leo, she ensured I would have to crawl back to her. I would have to live in her house, under her rules, completely dependent on her. It was a desperate, calculated grab for permanent control, masked as a grandmother's concern. She asked me to sign an affidavit, David said, his voice shaking. She wants me to swear under oath that you borrow money from me to feed your kid. I looked at my brother. Are you going to do it? David looked down at the $38,500 cash advance line on the bank statement. The money that saved his pride, the money that bought his loyalty. He traced the edge of the paper with his thumb. No, David said. His voice was suddenly very steady. I'm not signing anything. I'm giving this statement to the police. I left the coffee shop and drove straight to Great Aunt Dorothy's hotel. She was staying at a Marriott downtown while she looked for a house. I told her everything David had said about the emergency guardianship petition. I told her about the CPS trap. Dorothy didn't panic. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. We need Greg, she said. Greg was Dorothy's personal attorney. He handled multi-million-dollar commercial real estate contracts and had zero patience for small-town family drama. He met us in the hotel lobby an hour later. He reviewed the IP logs, the forged applications, the bank statements, and the CPS report. This isn't a family dispute, Greg said, tapping his gold pen on the glass table. This is a multi-count federal indictment waiting to happen. The wire fraud crosses state lines. The CPS call is filing a false report. The guardianship petition is an attempt to defraud the family court. He looked at me. Are you willing to press formal charges, Chloe? Because once we start this engine, you cannot stop it to protect your mother's feelings. I thought about Leo crying over the Nintendo Switch. I thought about the loan officer denying the house in Elmbrook. I thought about my mother standing on her porch, telling me to stop being bitter while she spent my future on country club dues. Start the engine, I said. Greg filed the paperwork the next morning. Detective Miller escalated the case to the district attorney's office. The DA looked at the overwhelming paper trail and approved the warrants immediately. On a Tuesday afternoon at exactly 2:15 p.m., a marked police cruiser pulled into my parents' pristine driveway. 2 officers walked up the brick steps. They knocked on the heavy oak door. When my mother answered, wearing her perfect white blouse, they did not ask her to come down to the station for a chat. They handed her a summons. The fallout was instant, and it was vicious. My mother did what she had always done. She weaponized the community. She didn't have the facts on her side, so she relied on the town's gossip network. On Thursday, Brenda, the president of my parents' homeowners association, approached me while I was loading groceries into my Civic outside the Piggly Wiggly. It's a shame what you are doing to Robert and Donna, Brenda said loudly, making sure the woman returning carts could hear. Bankrupting your own parents over a misunderstanding. Donna is devastated. I put my bags in the trunk, closed it, and looked Brenda dead in the eye. If you are concerned about their finances, Brenda, I suggest you ask Donna how she paid her HOA dues in January of last year. I'll give you a hint, it wasn't with her own checking account. Brenda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I got in my car and drove away. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Pastor Davis from the community church my parents attended. He left a long, rambling voicemail about the power of forgiveness, quoting scripture about honoring thy mother, and urging me to drop the charges so the family could heal. I saved the voicemail. It was just more proof of her manipulation. The pressure hit its peak on a Monday morning. Marcus had just parked his car at the high school where he taught. He was pulling his lesson plans from the back seat when another car boxed him in. It was my father's Buick. Robert got out. He looked 10 years older than he had on the porch. He walked over to Marcus. Marcus, you have to talk some sense into Chloe, my father pleaded. He kept looking around the parking lot, nervous. This is going too far. Donna's blood pressure is out of control. Family doesn't do this to family. Tell her to drop the police report. Marcus closed his car door. He stood a full head taller than my father. You're right, Robert, Marcus said calmly. Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't steal identities. Family doesn't call child protective services with lies. Chloe is protecting her family, me and Leo. And if you ever ambush me at my job again, I will file a harassment report. My father got back in his Buick and drove away. But the hardest moment didn't happen in a parking lot or a grocery store. It happened in my own house. I was putting Leo to bed on a Wednesday night. I had just read him a story. He was tucked under his dinosaur blanket. He was quiet, staring up at the ceiling. Mom? He asked. His small voice was tight. Yeah, buddy. Grandma called me today on Dad's phone while he was outside. She said you are trying to take her house away. She said you want her to go to jail. He looked at me, his eyes wide and confused. Are we the bad guys? My heart shattered. I felt the tears hot behind my eyes. She had bypassed us completely. She had reached out to a 5-year-old to turn him into a weapon. I sat on the edge of his bed. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay perfectly steady. No, Leo, we are not the bad guys. I held his little hand. Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices, and when they do, they have to face the consequences, even if they are family. Grandma made some bad choices, and she is upset because she has to fix them now. It is not your fault, and it is not my fault. He nodded slowly, processing the adult reality that had just invaded his childhood. He squeezed my fingers and closed his eyes. I walked out of his room, closed the door quietly, and leaned against the hallway wall. The sadness vanished, the guilt vanished, the doubt vanished. There was only resolve left. I was going to end this cycle. I pushed off the hallway wall and walked into the kitchen. My cell phone was vibrating against the granite counter. 8:42 p.m. The caller ID flashed Dorothy's name. I picked it up. She just called me, Dorothy said. Her voice wasn't shaking. It was ice cold. Who, Mom? She must have realized I was paying Greg's retainer, Dorothy said. She screamed at me for 10 minutes. She blamed me for turning you against her. She said I was destroying her family. Dorothy paused. I could hear the sound of city traffic through her hotel window. Then she used the exact same words she used in 1986. She told me, "You are dead to me." I closed my eyes. "What did you say?" "I told her the truth," Dorothy replied. "I said, I've been dead to you for 40 years, Donna. Now you have to answer to the living." The line went quiet. A shiver ran down my spine. My mother's ultimate weapon, cutting people off, had just failed against the one person who knew her longest. The federal court hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 9 a.m. Because the identity theft crossed state lines through online banking portals, and the financial amount exceeded a specific threshold, it was elevated beyond a simple municipal dispute. On Wednesday afternoon, Marcus and I sat in Greg's downtown office. The room smelled like expensive leather and lemon polish. Greg sat at the head of a massive mahogany conference table. He had 4 separate binders lined up in front of him. "We don't need a judge to feel sorry for you," Greg said, tapping his gold pen against the first binder. "We just need Judge Kelly to look at the math. The math does not lie." He opened the first binder. "Exhibit A, the IP addresses. We have the digital logs from Chase, Discover, and Capital One. They all ping exactly back to your parents' Oak Creek router address." He opened the second. "Exhibit B, the fraudulent signatures. We hired a forensic handwriting analyst. They compared the physical mail-in applications for the Wells Fargo loan to your mother's voter registration card. It is a 99.8% match." Then Greg pushed his laptop toward the center of the table. "But this is the nail in the coffin." I subpoenaed the audio recording from the anonymous CPS tip line. He pressed the spacebar. A faint burst of static filled the room. Then, a voice spoke. "Yes, I need to report a child in danger. The address is 412 Elm Street. The mother is completely broke. They don't even have running water. The boy is starving." The caller had tried to muffle her voice, dropping it an octave lower. But I knew the cadence. I knew the slight Midwestern drawl on the word water. I knew the sharp intake of breath between sentences. It was the same voice that had called me a reckless spender at the dinner table for 20 years. It was the same voice that had just told my 5-year-old son that I was trying to steal a house. Marcus reached under the table and gripped my knee. His hand was warm, but I felt entirely hollow. Hearing her lie to a government agency to take my child was different than just suspecting it. It was undeniable proof of her malice. "She used her own cell phone," Greg said, closing the laptop. "She didn't even think to block the caller ID. Arrogance makes people sloppy." That night, I laid out my clothes for court. A simple navy blazer, a white blouse, dark gray slacks, no jewelry, just the clothes of a working caterer. I packed my leather tote bag with my business ledgers. I didn't need to put on a show. I just needed to show the truth. Thursday morning, the sky over Milwaukee was a heavy, overcast gray. We parked in the structure across from the federal courthouse. Dorothy met us at the security checkpoint. She wore a sharp black trench coat and her heavy turquoise rings. She looked like armor. We walked down the long marble hallway toward courtroom 4B. The sound of our shoes echoed loudly against the walls. My parents were already sitting on a wooden bench outside the double doors. My mother wore a pastel blue suit. Her hair was perfectly styled. She had her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked like she was waiting for a Sunday church service to begin. My father sat next to her, staring at his shoes. His shoulders were hunched. He looked like a man waiting for an execution. Donna looked up as we approached. She didn't look at me. She looked right past me, her eyes locking onto Great-Aunt Dorothy. For a split second, the perfect suburban mask slipped. Her jaw tightened, and a flash of pure, terrified panic crossed her face. Dorothy didn't stop walking. She didn't blink. She just walked straight past her sister and pushed the heavy wooden doors open. We followed her inside. It was time to answer to the living. The courtroom was freezing. It smelled of old paper and floor wax. We sat at the plaintiff's table. Greg unpacked his binders. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Kelly walked in. She didn't look like a TV judge. She looked tired, wearing reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. Greg didn't waste the court's time with a dramatic opening statement. He stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and laid out the paper trail. "Your Honor, between March 2017 and August 2023, the defendant orchestrated a systematic campaign of identity theft resulting in $44,700 of fraudulent debt in her daughter's name." He handed the first binder to the clerk. Exhibit A contains the IP logs. 62 separate logins to the Capital One portal, all originating from the defendant's residential Comcast router. Donna's attorney, a man in a rumpled brown suit named Mr. Vance, stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. The defendant's daughter lived at that residence years ago. It is entirely possible she used the Wi-Fi." Greg didn't even blink. The plaintiff moved out in 2015. The earliest login is from 2017. Furthermore, the IP logs show the logins occurred primarily at 10:30 a.m. on weekdays. We have provided my client's catering ledgers and delivery logs. She was physically at her commercial kitchen across town during every single login. Judge Kelly flipped through the pages. She looked over her glasses at Donna. Donna smiled back, a tight, polite smile, as if they were just discussing a mix-up at the grocery store. Then Greg played the CPS recording. The audio echoed through the quiet courtroom. "The boy is starving." Donna's smile vanished. The color drained from her face. She reached up and touched the collar of her pastel blue suit. Beside me, Marcus exhaled a sharp breath. The judge stopped flipping pages. She just stared at my mother. The math was doing its job. "The defense argues this is a simple family misunderstanding over shared finances," Greg said. To clarify the intent, I called David Hayes to the stand. My mother whipped her head around to the gallery. David stood up from the back row. He hadn't sat on her side of the aisle. He had been sitting alone in the back the entire time. He walked through the wooden swinging gate. He didn't look at our parents. He took the oath and sat in the witness box. He looked exhausted. "Mr. Hayes," Greg asked, "in November of 2018, did your parents provide you with financial assistance?" "Yes," David said. His voice echoed faintly in the microphone. "My startup went under. They gave me $38,500 to settle my debts." "And where did you believe that money came from?" "My mother told me it was a prudent family investment from their retirement savings." Greg walked to the witness stand and handed David a piece of paper. "Can you read the highlighted line on this Chase bank statement?" David swallowed hard. He looked at the paper. November 3rd, 2018, cash advance. $38,500. "Whose name is on that account, Mr. Hayes?" "My sister's, Chloe Miller." My mother gripped the edge of the defense table. Her knuckles were bone white. "David, what are you doing?" she hissed, loud enough for the court reporter to look up. Judge Kelly tapped her gavel once. A sharp, loud crack. Silence from the defendant. Greg leaned against the podium. "Mr. Hayes, did you confront your mother about this cash advance after learning the truth?" David looked at me. Then he looked at Donna. The golden boy, the perfect son, was finally looking at the true price tag of his success. "Yes," David said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I asked her why she opened credit cards in Chloe's name to pay my debts. She didn't deny it." "What were her exact words?" Greg asked. David gripped the edges of the witness stand. "She said it was her right as a mother to manage family assets. She said Chloe didn't know how to use her credit anyway, so she was just reallocating it to where it mattered." The courtroom fell completely silent. The defense attorney closed his notebook. He knew there was nothing left to argue. You cannot cross-examine a confession spoken to a son. The defense attorney, Mr. Vance, stood up slowly. He didn't look at David. He looked at his legal pad. "No cross-examination, Your Honor." David stepped down from the witness box. He walked down the center aisle, right past our parents' table. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He walked out the heavy wooden doors and let them swing shut behind him. He was done playing the golden child. Mr. Vance called his next witness. "The defense calls Robert Hayes." My father stood up. He walked to the front of the courtroom like a man dragging a heavy chain. He took the oath. He sat down and adjusted the microphone, his hands trembling. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared straight ahead at the wood paneling of the judge's bench. Vance tried a soft, sympathetic approach. "Mr. Hayes, did you ever suspect your wife was maliciously trying to ruin your daughter's financial life?" "No," Robert mumbled. He rubbed his forehead. "Donna she gets overwhelmed with the bills. We had some tough years. She was just trying to keep the family afloat. It was a mistake, but she meant well." Greg stood up for the cross-examination. He didn't yell. He didn't pace. He just picked up the second binder, walked to the podium, and opened it. "Mr. Hayes, let's talk about keeping the family afloat," Greg said. "On October 14th, 2020, did your daughter Chloe hand you a cashier's check for $9,200? Robert flinched. The color drained from his face. "Yes. What was that money for?" "To pay our past due mortgage. We were facing foreclosure." "Did you pay the bank with that check?" Robert's breathing hitched. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. "No." "What did you do with it?" Robert finally looked at Donna. Donna glared back at him. Her eyes were wide, silently demanding him to hold the line. She was expecting him to take the hit, just like he always did. But Robert was tired. 40 years of absorbing her toxicity had broken him down to nothing. "Donna took it," Robert said, his voice cracking. She put the cashier's check into her own personal checking account. She paid the overdue mortgage using the Chase credit card. The card opened fraudulently in Chloe's name? Greg asked. Yes. You knew she was doing this? Robert stared down at his hands. I found the P.O. box key in her purse that week. I asked her about the mail. She started screaming at me. She said if I couldn't provide for the family like a real man, she had to do it herself. She said it was the only way to save the house. So I stopped asking. He closed his eyes. Tears leaked into his wrinkles. I was just too afraid of her rage to stop her. My stomach turned, not out of anger, out of a deep, exhausting pity. My father wasn't a victim of her fraud. He was an accomplice who traded my financial survival for a quiet living room. The trial wrapped up by 2:45 p.m. Judge Kelly didn't even call for a recess to deliberate. She had the bank records, the IP logs, the recorded CPS call, and the sworn confessions of both the golden son and the enabling husband. She addressed the courtroom. Her voice was flat, authoritative, and completely devoid of sympathy. Donna Hayes, the paper trail in this court shows a staggering level of deceit, Judge Kelly said, looking directly at my mother. You didn't just steal money. You weaponized the financial system, and then you weaponized the child welfare system to destroy your own daughter's life. Donna stood up. She gripped the table. Your Honor, I was just trying to protect my grandson. Chloe is— Do not speak, Judge Kelly interrupted. The command snapped through the room like a whip. My mother's mouth clicked shut. Your own son testified to your malice. Your husband testified to your fraud. The evidence is absolute. Judge Kelly looked down at her sentencing guidelines. Due to your age and lack of prior criminal history, I am suspending a custodial prison sentence. Donna exhaled a loud, shaky breath. She looked at Mr. Vance. She thought she had won. She thought she was walking away with a slap on the wrist. However, Judge Kelly continued, her tone dropping colder, you are sentenced to 5 years of strict federal probation. Furthermore, I am ordering full restitution for the fraudulent balances, plus punitive damages for the emotional distress, legal fees, and credit repair costs. You will pay Chloe Miller exactly $114,000. My mother froze. If you miss a single meeting with your probation officer, Judge Kelly stated, or if you default on the court-ordered restitution schedule by a single day, the suspended sentence will be revoked immediately. You will serve 36 months in a federal penitentiary. We are adjourned. The gavel hit the sound block. My mother's knees gave out. Mr. Vance had to grab her elbow to keep her from collapsing onto the floor. $114,000. It was more money than the total equity they had in their pristine brick house, the very house she had stolen my money to save. She had spent her entire life terrified of looking poor to the country club, and now, a federal judge had just handed her the bill. I watched Mr. Vance ease my mother back into the heavy wooden chair. I didn't stay to see if she cried. I didn't stay to hear my father apologize to the empty room. I just turned around and walked down the center aisle. Marcus held my left hand. Dorothy walked on my right. We pushed through the double doors and stepped out into the courthouse hallway. The air smelled the same, but it felt entirely different. It felt breathable. The reality of rebuilding started the next morning. My credit score didn't fix itself overnight. The fraud alerts and disputed accounts took months to fully clear from my record. But Dorothy didn't let us lose our momentum. She drove to the bank with us on a Tuesday morning. She sat in the leather chair across from Mr. Anadlens Henderson, the exact same loan officer who had denied us weeks earlier, and she co-signed the mortgage for the Elmbrook house. I invest in hard work, Dorothy told him, signing the paperwork with her thick black pen, and this girl outworks everyone. My parents had to list the pristine brick house in Oak Creek. They couldn't afford a $114,000 restitution payment on my father's pension. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from Rebecca, who heard it from a client, that Brenda and the HOA had a field day with the for sale sign. My mother moved into a small rented condo 2 towns over. She lost her country club membership. She lost her audience. Most importantly, she lost her control. David and Alyssa had to downsize too, without the safety net of my stolen money. He sent me one text message, a few weeks after the trial. I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth. I'm going to work on being a better man. I didn't reply, but I didn't block his number either. Some bridges just need a long time to sit empty before anyone can walk on them again. Today my catering business is booming. I bought a second delivery van last month, brand new, with my own restored credit. We celebrate holidays in the Elmbrook house now. Just Marcus, Leo, Dorothy, and a few close friends. Nobody checks the price tags on the gifts. Nobody makes passive-aggressive jokes over the dinner table. I was standing at my kitchen island yesterday, prepping vegetables for a big corporate order. Leo was sitting on the living room rug, building a massive tower out of wooden blocks. He knocked it over, laughed loudly, and started building it all over again. He isn't worried about who the bad guys are anymore. His world is safe. They called me a reckless spender for 20 years. They used that label to keep me small, to make themselves feel responsible, and to justify taking what I built from scratch. But I learned something very important. The people who loudly criticize how you build your life are usually the ones secretly trying to live off it. True family isn't about shared blood. It is about the people who help you pour the foundation, instead of secretly tearing down your walls. Healing from family betrayal is a quiet, heavy journey that you often have to walk without an apology. If you are walking that road right now, and if this story made you feel a little less alone, please leave a comment and share your experience. Hit subscribe to join our community. You survived the hardest part, and your peace is worth protecting. I'll see you in the next one.